Well, hello there, Tampa Bay, and welcome to the Coach White Sports Special. I'm your host, Coach Chuck White, and my guest is Coach Marcus Paula, former Jefferson High School great basketball coach, and he has a lot of experiences to tell you about, especially during his time and tenure during the coaching days at Jefferson High School. Marcus, we want to say hello there and welcome to the Coach White Show, man.
Well, thank you, Coach, for inviting me, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be with you here today.
This is your first time being here on our sports special, so why don't we let you just introduce yourself to our many listening and viewing audience. Just start with some of the first time that you got involved with basketball.
Well, I guess I first started playing basketball on the cement courts at the old George Washington Junior High School. I started out, our house was a couple of blocks away, and I was there probably every day. And I'd stay out there and shoot until it got dark and past dark. So, and it was Coach Tom Spack at that time was the coach there, and he had a little paper cutout in the locker room on how to shoot a jump shot. And so I copied that picture, and that's how I started out shooting a jump shot.
Boy, what a great way to teach shooting jump shots. Just give you a picture and say, okay, copy that picture, and you got it. Well, when you got through those early experiences, did you ever go into recreation or club sports, anything?
Well, we played at the local parks. We'd go down to Clearfield and Cascaden Park, and we played in a number of leagues, you know, in three-man tournaments, and down to Trailer Park as well. We'd play down there.
Trailer Park, that's the current Martin Luther King Gymnasium.
That's correct. I'm reminiscing back, remember, 40 years now.
I know. Well, you got involved with several other basketball experiences I'm sure you want to continue talking about.
Well, then I went to my first organized playing of basketball was at George Washington Junior High School. And Tony Shanti was the coach, who later on became a basketball and football official here in Hillsborough County. And that was, you know, that got me started. And then from there, you know, moved on into high school.
You talked to us before we came on the air, something about coaching at HCC, and you talked about Dale Clay.
Yes, ACC, this is one of those little trivial moments. Back in the early 70s, when ACC had just opened their doors, Roland Acosta knew the president of the junior college, Dr. Schamberg, and he somehow talked himself into being athletic director. And he hired me as the basketball coach. And that was my first coaching experience at the junior college level. No one had given me any guidance before that. And we had a 6-game schedule, and we had cheerleaders. We're the group that named them the Hawks. We got the school colors red, white, and blue. And of the 6 games, we won 1 game against Polk Junior College.
So you had a 6-game basketball schedule at that time. And I might add that I was able to follow you during that time and be the first official basketball coach when they went into the Florida Junior College Association, but that's something we'll talk about much later. Why don't you talk about Dale Clay, the experience you had with Dale Clay during the coaching days? Sure.
Dale Clay, if you remember, played at Hillsborough High School, then went on and played at Florida State with Dave Cowens. And Dale became the first basketball coach at the new Jefferson High School, and he hired me on as his junior varsity coach, and that's where I really started my coaching experience.
You said Dale Clay went to the Final Four.
Yes, Dale has some great players, and he did an outstanding job in leading the Jefferson team to the Final Four. Then he ran up against a pretty awesome Miami Jackson team who won the state tournament, but come to find out they had 3 players that were over age and probably 21 years old or older. But nevertheless, Dale had an outstanding career at Jefferson.
Dale Clay was a great basketball player, as I can recall himself. Is that correct?
That's correct. I remember when Dale showed me a picture one time when he was in the 10th grade. He was a short little fellow, and he was in the ROTC, and he had a picture with him with his rifle, and the rifle was taller than he was.
Yeah.
And he grew up to be about 6'3", 6'4", and from Hillsborough High School, he went to the Final Four basketball tournament in 1965. He then went to Chipola Junior College, and from there he went on to Florida State, playing some of the great Hugh Durham basketball teams.
Boy, that's a lot of great history, and I hope the many listeners and viewers are paying particular attention to some of this history that you talk about. When did you get involved with the City League at Trailer Park? Did we talk about that yet?
Everyone in Tampa, more at some time or another, played at the Martin Luther King
Trailer Park
yeah. Gymnasium, and there were some great players, retired players. John Pellegrino would play in that league, Dana Kirk, and other players, and sometimes would play and sometimes would fight, but but nevertheless, it was always a good time had by all.
Play and fight, huh?
Well, I tried not to get involved with the fights. I'd sort of back away, but there were some beauties down there.
Yeah, but there were some fights, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I used to tell guys. We grew up playing 10 minutes and fight 5 out of the 10.
Yeah.
And then we go back and play another 10 and fight, but we never harmed or hurt anybody. We just scuffle and tussle around, and somebody said, all right, come on, let's get back and start playing games. That's the way you guys probably came up too, huh?
Oh, sure. It's mostly just pushing, and you fouled me and the referee didn't call it, and that type of story.
Well, you said you played on a cement court. We didn't have cement courts when I started. We started on the clay and the dirt court, and then on the asphalt court, they had holes, and sometimes you'd be dribbling and the ball would just hit that hole and bounce away from you.
Well, I can appreciate that, but on those cement courts, the pole that held up the backboard was real close to the baseline, and if you would get in there a little too tight, you'd ram into that pole, and that would hurt.
Yeah, even in my high school days at Don Thompson, we had a wall about maybe a foot or two. When you make a layup, you had to take your feet kind of bounce off the wall. And most teams that came to play us, that was a disadvantage to them and an advantage to us. We're used to that wall, and we know how to go to it. So don't let a big, harsh foul come at that time, because you're crashing that wall. Why don't we talk about some of those coaches during that day when you were coaching at Jefferson? Well, first of all, talk about some of your players when you coached at Jefferson, like Porter and Staley.
Well, as JV coach, and Dale Clay was varsity coach, we had some great players there. We had Ricky Gallen,
yes,
a 7-footer who went on to play at Louisville. Mm-hmm. He was recruited by Dana Kirk. There was Hubert Smith, John Triggs, Gilbert Sims, and hopefully, I'm forgetting a lot of them, but we had some good talent. Then when I became coach, we had Russell Gallen, Rodney Gallen, 2 big fellows there, Mike Milam, Louis Lasada, Gilbert Sims played for us as well, and so we had some outstanding athletes there.
You had 3 Gallen brothers, is that right?
That's correct. Ricky was the oldest and the tallest. And
yes.
It seems like every son got a little bit shorter, but I don't know if 6'5" is short. So Ricky was 7 foot, Russell was about 6'8", and Rodney was about 6'5", 6'6".
What about Staley and Porter?
Oh, Leroy Staley, in my opinion, has to be one of the greatest athletes. He went on to play at Indiana State, and he played with those great Larry Bird teams.
Wow.
And he was the sixth man on that team sometimes he'd start, but he was actually roommates with Larry Bird.
Wow, what an honor. What an honor, the great Larry Bird.
He's still an outstanding athlete.
But some of the coaches in that area during that time, over at Plant, Lato, Chamberlain, Middleton, and Blake and all, can you remember any of those?
Sure. Even though this is 40 years ago, some of these memories just stick with you. Some of the outstanding coach, one in particular, was Richard Dyer at Plant High School.
Yes, sir.
And you're familiar with Richard. And he was probably one of the most intense coaches on the sidelines you've ever seen.
Believe you me.
Yeah. And he, back then, now we're going back 40 years, I'd categorize him as a Bobby Knight type. He was intense, and you either loved him or you hated him. And I loved him.
You had Dick Pusins, Frank Lentz, Art Smith, Herman Valdez.
All great coaches.
Yeah, and yours truly.
And you were there as well, that's correct. You were back at Blake.
Right.
I recall one incident with, we were playing Lato, and Dick Pusins was the coach, and the game was intense, coming right down to the wire, and I don't know what possessed me to do this, but I just stood up and walked across the scorer's table and sat down next to Dick.
Wow. Wait, let me understand this now. You guys coaching against each other,
Yeah.
and you got so intense over a call or whatever, so you left your bench, went beyond, across the scoring table, and sat next to the opposing coach.
That's correct. And it was all done in great fun and the excitement of the game, and there was nothing negative about it.
Yeah.
And we chatted a few minutes, and then I went back.
Well, Dick, Gordon Gibbons got nothing on you. I've seen him when he walked up in the stands, and then when he walked out of the door.
Gordon was at Jesuit, and he
Yeah.
was another one.
Yeah. Well, talk about Frank Lentz. He was, when I came in, he was a czar, a dean of basketball coaching.
Well, when I was playing back in the early and mid 60s, he was already an established basketball coach. And it was quite an honor for me to coach against him as a coach. And I remember we played him at his gymnasium for the first time.
Chamberlain.
At Chamberlain, okay? And I was, in awe of him. And, he's been outstanding for many, many years. He's retired recently, and he still keeps in excellent shape.
Art Smith.
Art Smith at
Middleton.
At Milton, that's right. We didn't play Milton at that time, okay? And it was just a few years later that Plant actually played you at Blake.
Yes.
But Milton was not on our schedule, and they should have been. And now, obviously, they're playing everywhere.
That must have been just at the beginning of integration.
Yes, and you were certainly one of the outstanding citizens and teachers and administrators that made that difficult situation go smoother.
Yeah, over at Plant.
At Plant, yes.
Yeah. Well, Herman Valdez was at Robertson, and he had one of the great winning teams. He had some of the great players over there. Charlie Bradley was one of them, Clarence James and others. Talk about Coach Herman Valdez's teams himself.
Herman was a winner everywhere he's gone. He had outstanding teams year after year after year, had outstanding players. I believe he got to the Final Four basketball tournament, and he's won, many district and regional championships. He is certainly one of the outstanding coaches.
Well, we must give credit to Winston Davis during the time he was playing for me at Blake, and when they integrated and all these kinds of things came about right in the middle of the season almost, he had to leave Blake and go over to Plant. Plant was supposed to send 200 people, and we were supposed to send 200. We sent 200, and Plant sent 2. But getting down to Winston Davis, I know the joke was when he played with Plant, after having been playing with Blake, we both had black and gold colors, however Plant called theirs gold and black.
Yeah.
Well, Winston got outside the baseline to throw the ball in. He had been playing with Bell and Bowling so long till he see that same little black and gold. He threw the ball right at the Bowling, and Richard Dyer used to kid him about that, say, hey, you're not playing with them anymore, you play with us.
That's definitely a habit they had formed playing with those guys for so long. But I need to say that back in those days, right in the early days of integration, I think especially at Plant High School, there were 3 people who made things smooth, and that was yourself, Winston Davis, and Richard Dyer. And those basketball teams and those players had outstanding behavior and were outstanding students and outstanding citizens. And it's definitely a loss that we have lost Winston today.
He was a great man, a great player, and a great basketball player. He shot that ball, he and Frazier, I thought, shot the ball out farther than anybody during that era. You remember that?
Oh, absolutely. The scouting report on Frazier is that when he came across half court, he was open.
Oh, yeah.
He was ready to shoot.
He was, and he would shoot and he would score. And Winston shot the ball almost behind his head when he shot, and he would make that basket.
At that time, Richard Dyer played a 1-3-1 with zone defense with Winston down in front of the basket, and he was just as good a rebounder as well. He was just an outstanding basketball player all the way around.
I do remember Winston playing baseball, too, over at the Blake High School.
Oh, I didn't know he played baseball.
He was on the baseball team. I do remember that. Well, let's talk about your relationship with some of the officials. How did you receive officials? I would say that I can recall vaguely that whenever we played a basketball game, whatever side of town it was, we would always meet at another restaurant or someplace with the coaches and the officials. Can you recall?
Yes, those were the good old days. Yeah. Many of the officials, after the game, no matter how good or bad their call was at the time, but it's difficult to officiate basketball, we'd meet afterwards and have a bite to eat.
Yes.
And I particularly remember Ed Wells, who during a game, and matter of fact, we were playing Plant at the time, and he asked if we were going to go get a bite to eat afterwards, and I said, sure. And when we got there, he presented me with a jar of moonshine. Oh. And I still have it today. I still have it in the refrigerator. Now, I got to say, I haven't drank more than maybe a tablespoon of it because that'll grow hair on your head.
It will grow hair on your head. That's why you got got all that hair on your head now, huh?
Well, maybe it burned it off a bit.
Oh, okay. There's all these coaches and these athletes. They spread it around after retiring and stopped playing, and somehow Pewson's, Richard Dyer, and you guys came up with some organization called the Legends. Talk about that before we end.
Yes, it all started with a group of coaches who would meet for lunch, and now they finally ended up meeting the first Wednesday of each month at Brunchy's restaurant on Dorothdale Mabry. And we have a website, which is coaching-legends. There's a dash between the words coaching and legends, so it's coaching-legends.com. And we've got photographs. Probably more than 100 coaches have come through, and you've been there as well. And
I've been there, I'm a member.
And you're a member. You're definitely a coaching legend, that's for sure. You're one of the true coaching legends. But we meet every Wednesday, and Dick Pewsons is the moderator or facilitator. And it's a good time had by all. And I certainly invite all former coaches and anyone associated with sport in the Tampa Bay area to come out the first Wednesday of each month.
Well, what he means about associated with sports, you didn't have to be a player or coach, just been a fan or someone who had enthusiasm of sports and interested in being with coaches and athletes. Well, I do know there's such guys like Billy Reed, Leroy Long, Dolly Nelson, Richard Batman Woods, Mike Kennedy, with whom I spoke this morning, Dick Pewson, Richard Dye, Frank Lentz, and I told you about that. So I'm a member of two coaching legend organizations. We got a Tampa Bay legend organization that meets twice a month. We meet every first and every third Tuesday in Tampa. We meet on the first Tuesday. We meet on 29th Street to Woody's Cafeteria, which is a block south of First Baptist Church. And then we meet on the third Tuesday on 34th Street between 24th and 25th Avenue across from St. John's Church. So I am what you call a presiding officer of that group, and we got about 40 players, so we have 4 group leaders, and we think we have a great organization there as well. So between those two, I think we should get quite a bit of participation from legends and all.
Oh, it's fantastic that these retired coaches come out and still socialize with each other and reminisce about old times and talk about the heartaches that happened and then the good times, and that's terrific.
You know, you said this has been 40 years what we've been talking about. Now, today, all of these things are still going with different people coaching, different players, of course. How do you compare yesteryear's sports days, particularly basketball, against today's basketball program?
Well, there's, back then, 40 years ago and before that, there were great basketball players, great basketball teams, and today is the same. There's many great basketball players, but it seems to me back then, a coach, especially a basketball coach, was really on his own.
Yeah.
And you were the guy. And today, they seem to get more support with more people on their staff, which is the way to go. And so I think they're just as good athletes today as they were back then, and coaches as well.
I hear people talking on news medias and write-ups and whatever have you. The guys are bigger, stronger, they jump higher and run faster. I do know the guys are much taller today, and they do a lot of these things, but they don't seem to have the savvy, that basketball savvy that some guys used to. They all have experience on their physical attributes rather than their mental attributes.
You especially see that in the pros.
Yes.
It's difficult for me to watch professional basketball. It's just, a one-man game, give him the ball, and there he goes. In high school, they're developing, and in college is definitely the most exciting basketball. But, there's a lot more technology today as far as lifting weights and proper nutrition. So it seems way back when, going 40 years ago, they seemed to be just tougher, and today they're plenty tough too, but, we got to talk about when we were coaching, so we got to believe that we were tough guys.
We had that analgesic balm that we put on a guy. If he sprained his ankle, he gets some balm. If he sprained an arm, a shoulder, or broke a leg almost, I played a guy in practice for about 2 days before I found out his ankle was broken. I was had my trainer put balm on it. That's what we did. We put balm on, and the guys, if they got hurt in one game, they're ready for the next one. Didn't care what type of injury they had. But now these guys fall on their own and get hurt after all this technical stuff of weight training, these diets and all, and it take them I don't know how long before they could come back.
I can give you one example. Way back when Dale was the coach and he was coaching Ricky Gallen, he got bumped in the mouth and his tooth went through his lip.
Wow.
And so I guess today they'd take him out of the game and send him to the hospital. We eventually got him to a doctor, but we sort of pulled his lip out, and he got back in the game. He just kept right on going.
Yeah, right. One other thing too, we used to have 2 and 3 different cut off the players before they make the team, but now they don't have any cuts. And I notice guys come in the gym with 8 and 9 players, but we used to have 15 dress out always.
When we would have tryouts in the beginning of the season, you know, we had a pretty good idea of some of the players, but we'd have minimum, and you were saying a much bigger number, minimum of 50 kids coming out, trying out. And it was difficult to cut them, and some of them, you know, didn't like that, obviously. And I'm not quite sure what they do today. I think they keep most of the players, they keep them on the practice team and so forth, which is good for them.
Right, and sports didn't overlap each other like they do now, because you could play 2 or 3 sports. I played 3 sports when I was in high school. Well, Marcus, it's certainly been a pleasure having you here talking about the old as well as the new time sports, and we look forward to seeing you again sometime. So take care of yourself and give all the guys, the legends, and all my best regard. So that's it for the Coach White Sports Special. We certainly hope you've enjoyed this show as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. So be with us again on our next show right here on the Tampa Bay Community Network.
Is a special day. Today we gather as a nation and as an international community to recognize the selfless decision of one of the most influential women of our time. She's been recognized by religious figures and politicians around the world. To us, she's just Rachel. But to the rest of the world, she is the woman who, after having one too many drinks, chose not to drive home buzzed. Here today to honor Rachel is the family whose lives she spared.